I do a lot of patent litigation, hence some of the exhibits, but I also do a fair amount of Supreme Court and appellate work, including very active amicus brief
And that's your Supreme Court display?
practice.
You're watching Public Affairs. Berkowitz is my name, and politics is our game. And we'll be doing lots of politics and public policy this evening because we have as our guest David Applegate. And what David is going to do is tell you who the next Supreme Court justice will be. That is, who President Trump will nominate to the Supreme Court. And if he or she gets confirmed, that will be the 9th Supreme Court justice. So what you need to know or should know about David Applegate is, 1, he's a smart guy. 2, he's a great trial lawyer. 3, he understands the Constitution, and he understands this thing, the U.S. Constitution. He understands constitutional law, but more or less, more importantly, he understands the dynamic that we're going through now. So David Applegate, who will President Trump nominate to the U.S. Supreme Court?
With the understanding that I do not speak for my clients or my firm, I believe...
Which is Williams, Montgomery, and John.
Williams, Montgomery, and John.
A great trial lawyer firm. The firm itself is great as trial lawyers. You're a great trial lawyer, as I said. You are speaking for David Applegate, is what we're saying.
That's correct. Speaking for David Applegate, the next Supreme Court Justice of the United States will be Diane Sykes of the United States Court of Appeals for the Federal Circuit right here in Chicago.
Yes. Diane Sykes. How would you know it will be Diane Sykes? Because Donald Trump is perhaps the most, not perhaps, the most unpredictable president we've ever had.
In truth, I don't know it. Donald Trump may not yet even know who he's going to appoint. But I say this because Donald Trump, as Casey Stengel would say, or Yogi Berra, predictions are very tough to make, especially about the future. But with Donald Trump, I think a high degree of certainty is 50% or more. And I think the chances are 50% or more that Trump will and should nominate Diane Sykes.
So is currently an appellate judge, federal appellate judge, 7th Circuit Court of Appeals.
She's out of the state of Wisconsin. She is a tried and true conservative, which Donald Trump has promised to pick. He is notable in recent presidential history for actually having submitted during the campaign a list of nominees from whom he would pick should he be elected.
21.
Came up with a list of 21 names, got them jointly from 2 different organizations, both known for their dedication to the Constitution.
Which are?
Which are the Heritage Foundation, started around 1980 in Washington, D.C., and is a conservative think tank and public policy advisor that committed, before the results of the election were known, to give its best advice, not only on this issue but on other policy issues, to whoever the nominee would be, because Heritage Foundation wants to see this country succeed and the administration succeed.
And the other organization?
The other organization is the Federalist Society for Law and Public Policy Studies, more familiarly known as the Federalist Society, a group of largely conservative libertarians and judges who sprang out of a law school movement in 1982 to offer a more conservative and libertarian perspective.
Are you you're a regular guy, which means you understand Donald Trump, notwithstanding his $4 to $8 billion or so in net worth, he is a regular guy?
He knows how to talk to the regular guy.
He connects with the auto workers, with the steel workers, with the people who've been put out of jobs by these so-called great trade agreements, or so he would say. He connects with all of them.
And you get out into the so-called heartland and ask them, why would you, a blue-collar worker from a coal mining state, or a pig rancher in South Dakota, or a farmer in Iowa, vote for some billionaire who inherited a real estate empire from his father and moved it from Queens to Manhattan.
Okay, why would they? What's the answer?
They would say, because he cares about me and he cares about the country. And they did not get that sense from the other candidates.
Okay, so because he did say, I think back in May, when it was only a list of 10 or 11, and then grew in September to a list of 21, he
That's
said
correct.
consistently through this, I will pick, I guarantee you conservatives and anybody else, I will pick from that 21, that list of 21, right? He said that.
He said that.
Why would he
and
say that? Why did he make that commitment?
For two reasons, in my view. Number one, Donald Trump is smart enough to know what he does not know. Now, a lot of people will laugh at that, but this is a man who puts winning above all else. Okay. And he knows that he doesn't know anything about the Constitution. He doesn't know anything
He doesn't know anything about this document, 27 pages or so, U.S.
He
Constitution?
knows a lot more about it now than he did
He's learning. He's learning.
6 weeks ago. He's learning, and he has a very facile mind, and he's capable of learning at a great rate. But he knew nothing about the Constitution.
So why does he care about the 21?
He knew nothing about the judges, but he knows the people who do know about the judges. And those are organizations like Heritage Foundation and the Federalist Society.
So these 21 are true blue conservatives. Each and every one you would be comfortable with as a conservative. If you picked any of these, you would say they're not going to be like those so-called stealth liberals. They're not going to be a Blackman, a Stevens, a Souter that Republicans, presidents nominated, thought they were conservative, or so they said, and they turned out to be liberal.
That is my belief.
That's not going to happen to any of these 21.
That is my belief.
And most importantly, you're saying, why is it 50% that he would pick Dianne Sykes?
Because, number one, as I said, with Donald Trump, 50% I think is the highest level.
Highest you'll go.
The probability.
But why are you saying Dianne Sykes as opposed to any of the others?
Because when you look through the list of 21, you can narrow it down to a top 8, and there seems to be
you've
a
done that.
consensus.
So
going on
100%, almost
And-
100% sure it'll be within the top 8.
Out of that top 8, you have 2 women and 6 white males.
Okay.
And this is a very political calculation. And that is the second reason
Why is it
Donald,
political? Why is it? And will it be political if Hillary Clinton had been there? Would it be political?
Absolutely, it would be.
Whoever the president
because
is, it's a political decision.
becoming a federal judge is a very political decision.
Why?
I believe it was Antonin Scalia himself who said at the 2014 or the 2015 National Lawyers Convention of the Federalist Society at the Mayflower Hotel in Washington, D.C., if you want to become a judge, get involved in politics. Because you have to have the nomination of the president.
Because this document says so. The U.S. Constitution says president nominates. Right?
The president is required to nominate it, but just as Donald Trump doesn't know everything about everything, whoever the president is doesn't know everything about everything. So the president typically looks to home state senators.
Because
says,
also, who's going to
do
make
you
the final
recommend?
decision? He can nominate, but who is going to, according to this document, decide if the nominee will be confirmed, i.e. become a judge?
The Senate will decide through their advise and consent power.
The total Senate, starting with the Senate Judiciary Committee, will hold hearings. They will make a recommendation. It'll be like 16 to 18 members on that committee. They will hold a vote. They'll make a recommendation to the Senate. The Senate then will vote, all 100 of them, and for any judge. And there are 800 federal judges or so, about 600 district court judges, 200 appellate judges, and then the 9 on the Supreme Court, roughly.
I believe those
Ballpark.
numbers are approximately correct.
All of them go through that process we've just said.
They all go through that process. The one number on which I would correct you is not all 100 senators necessarily vote. In fact, there's a very cute, very short story about Justice O'Connor, the first woman nominated and confirmed to the Supreme Court. She was voted confirmed unanimously, but only 99 to nothing, because Max Baucus of Montana wasn't there.
You couldn't be there.
He couldn't be
And
there.
you cannot vote by proxy. You have to be there.
So what he did was he sent her a signed copy of his book, A River Runs Through It, as sort of a makeup apology.
Okay. But most likely 100 will be there if it's going to be at all close.
If it's close, you'll get 100. If it's
And
overwhelming, you could be unanimously confirmed 97, 98.
you only need
99,
50, a
99.
majority, to get on the district court, what we call the trial court level, those 600. You only need a majority on the appellate level, 50 or more, if everybody's voting. Well, if it's 50 and 50, then the vice president casts the deciding vote. So you need 50, and presumably the vice president would vote with the nominee of the Trump. But when you get to the Supreme Court, it changes. How come?
It changes because the Constitution itself, of which this is an annotated copy, the entire Constitution, as you know, is a much smaller document.
So yeah, that document is what, like 1,000 pages, annotations, right?
It's about 1,100 pages.
But the
it's
Constitution
got-
itself is a really thin document, 27 pages. You can read it. It's a quick read. You can read on your way to work on 25 ride from Winnetka to the Loop.
You can carry it in your pocket, and I recommend that people do.
Who said that to you about carrying it in the pocket? That would be Dean Gerhard Casper when you were taking
It
constitutional
was
law, right?
Dean Gerhard Casper at the University of Chicago Law School, who's
What did he say?
also the one who inspired me to drive downtown and buy my annotated Constitution.
What did the dean say about putting this in your pocket? Do you remember?
No, except that he quoted another constitutional
He
law
said,
scholar.
look, ladies and gentlemen, put this in your pocket. Here, take it, just demonstrate. Because you have a pocket, I don't. So you'd put it where in your suit pocket?
I actually have
You
my
have
own
one? You have your own.
copy
So you did it. He
in
said,
my
ladies and
own
gentlemen,
pocket.
take that Constitution.
This is not only the Constitution, but the Declaration of Independence.
He said, take that Constitution, put it in your pocket, and don't leave home without it. And you faithfully, you love this document. Would that be right?
I
Okay,
love
we got
this
to pick up the
document.
shown. We're doing a little too much
It's
go
a
from
very
now.
simple document. So
Okay, let's get,
let
because
me
we got to
just-
get right to the other people, unless there's something you want to say.
The only point I was going to make is that nothing in the Constitution provides the number of votes that the Senate must give. The Senate's
Okay.
own rules determine that.
Used to be they could filibuster.
It used to be the Senate could filibuster, which meant it would take 60 votes for judicial confirmation. During the Obama administration, Democrats were frustrated that Republicans were not acting fast enough or were not cooperative enough in their view. Under Harry Reid, they changed the rules, exercised the so-called nuclear option, said you only need a simple majority for confirmation to the lower courts, but the filibuster still remains in place, at least as a theoretical option for the Supreme Court.
Okay, so we said Diane Sykes will come back if there's more time, but briefly, 12 years on the appellate court, 7th Circuit. She also was on the state Supreme Court in Wisconsin, right?
Yes, she was.
Okay, so some people like her for that because she's got that state, Republicans like state experience as well as federal experience. We can come back, but you say she's a true blue conservative. She will adhere to the Constitution, so forth. I want to get to the others quickly, and we'll come back to her. 50% shot, you say 50% chance that Trump goes with her, and then your second.
My second choice, in terms of a prediction, although he might be my first choice personally,
Preference, yeah.
is William Pryor out of the 11th Circuit sitting in Atlanta. Bill is...
Is it sitting in Atlanta or Alabama?
he is from
He's from Alabama, but the
Alabama,
11th Circuit
but
sits
the
in
11th
Atlanta.
Circuit sits in Atlanta, Georgia.
But okay, so
And
keep
he
going
is-
about him. Yeah.
He is a big Alabama fan. We'll be watching Alabama play Clemson tonight.
As we tape this show on the 9th, tonight
as we
is the
tape
Alabama
the show,
Clemson.
and
Okay.
we'll be rooting for the team in red.
Where do you? Well, tell us, where do you go to school? You know,
Tulane Law School.
Law school.
Interestingly enough.
not a real. Most of the Supreme Court, if not all of the Supreme Court, went to Yale or Harvard. This guy goes to Tulane.
And
His
this
undergraduate is like Northeast Louisiana.
this
It's
is
like
a-
Hoboken. I mean,
This
right.
is another reason I like this guy, and another reason he's so high on my list.
He's a regular guy.
He is a regular guy. He's a great guy to have dinner with. He's a great guy to discuss football with.
And what office did he hold prior to?
He was Attorney General.
So he's a
of
politician
of the
in
state of
past.
Alabama.
He gets this stuff.
If you want to be a federal judge, get involved in politics. According to the late Anthony
And the Federal
Scalia.
Society loves him, right?
Again, not speaking for the
Leonard Leo.
society,
Yeah.
but yes, Federalist Society gives him very high marks, stands behind
Give
him.
us a feel for some of the cases he's decided. What makes you confident from the cases?
You know, I would be hard pressed to name any of his cases in specifics here late in the afternoon.
I'll
I
tell you
can
one. Photo ID. He likes these photo ID laws. He says they're constitutional. You know, okay, there's a bit of a burden, but it cuts down on fraud, and that's important interest. I'm generalizing. Republicans like these photo ID laws, right? Democrats don't like them.
Why would anyone not want to protect the vote by requiring positive identification for citizenship?
Because it's a burden.
and
Don't you
voting?
understand? If you're a
But
minority, you
rights-
don't have a license, you don't drive a car, you don't have an ID.
Let's
it's a burden
find,
to you,
let's,
David.
Let's find these people. If you can find one person in this country who is qualified to vote but cannot afford an ID, let's
I say
find.
can't afford. You got to take the
let's
time. You
find
got to
that-
go downtown.
Citizenship is a responsibility.
You think it's worth $50 to go vote? If that's what it takes,
what-
the equivalent.
what-
They don't go downtown all the time, a lot of these people.
If you're not worth investing $50 in your country, then maybe you shouldn't be thinking about voting.
But so there are a lot
But
of these
let's
opinions.
find
Okay.
these people and let's get them IDs. Let's
Okay.
not dumb down democracy. Let's lift it up.
Okay. But has he done more? Has he given speeches about the kind of, country this should be? Has he talked about like we should, get the government out of education, not expand the Commerce Clause? Am I getting it right? Am I confusing? Isn't he one of those guys who's done that?
Those would be consistent with his view of the Constitution.
Is that too radical? Is that out of the mainstream?
It depends on what part of the stream you're standing in. If you're on the progressive left, then anyone to the right of Bernie Sanders is out of the mainstream.
Let me read this. I think it's right. Another specific quote time. But Congress should make free trade its main domestic concern. I think this is what Bill Pryor said. Congress should not subvert the Commerce Clause to regulate crime. Subvert the Commerce Clause in this document, the Constitution, to regulate crime, education, land use, family relations, or social policy with all that New Deal, Great Society stuff. That is Bill Pryor. That is not only the guy you say it's a 40% chance that he'll be nominated. If you had your way, you would make him the #1 choice, right?
He would be my #1 choice for exactly the
You
kinds
believe
of
in all those
reasons
things I just read?
I do.
And you believe the Constitution, to the extent he as a Supreme Court justice could push the country in that nation following faithfully this document, you would be a big Bill Pryor supporter in that push?
A Supreme Court justice can only help decide cases that come before the court. So it's a bit of a myth to say that the Supreme Court is going to push us in this direction or that direction.
If you could, they have some leeway. Don't
What we have had for some decades now is activist groups pushing an agenda that look for a particular case that they can then get before the Supreme Court, knowing that we have wandered so far in the 220, almost 7 years now since ratification of the Constitution. I think I've got that right.
You're a strict constructionist.
I am absolutely a strict
You're a
constructionist.
textual originalist.
A
Look at the words, look at the
textualist.
statute.
If Jeff, we are lawyers. If you were going to interpret a contract, you would of course look to the language of the
More
contract.
importantly, is Diane Sykes that kind of person?
Yes, she is.
Is Bill Pryor that kind of
Bill
person?
Pryor is that kind of
Number
person.
3, who's number 3 on your list?
Number 3 on my list would be Joan Larson.
Tell us about Joan.
She's currently on the Michigan Supreme Court, which is an elected position. She's held for about 16 months, I believe. Before that, she was a law professor
Why would you
in
say
Michigan.
she'd be third likely? Not only did Trump know nothing about this person, the Federalist Society can't know much. The Heritage can't know much. She hasn't been on the court, this appellate court, for like 16 months. Did she rant and rave as she was a law school professor at University of Michigan Law School? Did she tell everybody, I love the Constitution, or what?
She's a law professor. She has a written record. She also,
what's her written record as a law professor?
She also is the youngest of the 21 people.
Right, she's 48. She could be there another 40, 50 years possibly.
So if your thinking is you want someone who will support your view of the Constitution and your view of how to read the Constitution, maybe you want to get somebody young. She
was clerked. Who did she clerk for?
She clerked for
Scalia.
The justice she would be replacing.
Anton Scalia.
Anthony Scalia.
Who you have in your office, as we saw, maybe we'll show that, you have a replica of the Supreme Court, and most importantly, you have a replica of Anton Scalia right in your office.
Well,
Do you pray to him every day?
No, I don't pray to him every day. I keep that as a reminder that he was the third Supreme Court justice I ever met personally, and the first one
so she's
I ever
good.
had as
we
a
gotta,
law
we
professor.
gotta go because I squandered some time. So that she's number 3, and number 4 in your hit parade would be. Oh wait, what's the? So you said 40% chance. Did you say for Pryor, as far as your assessment of Trump? You're saying Trump 50% likely to go with Sykes, 40% with Pryor.
40% with Pryor.
And how much with
Joan Larson is a dark horse at 3%.
So we're up to 93%. Now we're going to number 4. We're really down here.
Number 4 at 2%, tied with Thomas Hardiman out of the Third Circuit would be Ray Kethledge out of the Eighth Circuit.
What's so good about Ray? What do you like about Ray?
What I like about Ray is he has both prosecutorial experience in the sense of working for the Judiciary Committee. He was Judiciary Committee counsel to Spencer Abraham. He was also law clerk to Justice Kennedy. He's 50 years old.
Good credentials.
Michigan law shows strong adherence to the Constitution.
And he's been on the Sixth Circuit Court of Appeals for 8 years, so he should have a good record. People who study this should be pretty comfortable he's going to be conservative, right?
That's correct.
And he's 49. He's another youngster. Long time there, right?
I believe he just turned 50, but
turned 50. Sorry, okay.
He's a relative youngster.
Yeah.
What
about
Tom
Hardiman?
Thomas Hardiman at 51. Hardiman is an interesting choice, and some people would put him first, including, if I'm not mistaken, the host of this show.
Yeah, because he's from Pennsylvania. Look, not to be political, you went with Sykes from Wisconsin. That's a big state for Trump. You went with Pryor from Alabama. Okay, not so much a big state in getting elected, but his attorney general is from there. In fact, I think from the same town. I think perhaps Pryor was born in Mobile, Alabama. Certainly Sessions is from Alabama, so that counts. And then Larson's from Michigan. Trump won Michigan. You like her, and now you like Well, where's Kethledge from? I don't know. Eighth Circuit, is that Iowa? I don't know. Somewhere around there. So, but then Hardiman, which I like, you're right, Pennsylvania. He wouldn't be president if he hadn't won Pennsylvania. He's got to love that. This guy, I think he drove a cab to get through law school. You can't get more regular than that, right?
He is a regular guy. He's from Pennsylvania. He's very strong First Amendment. He's very strong on Second Amendment. And he has ties to both Democrats and Republicans. One of his relatives ran...
And better law school, like better education. Not quite Yale or Harvard, but Notre Dame and Georgetown, 2 very good schools, twice confirmed by the Senate. Last time in 2007 for Third Circuit, 95-0. How can these guys really, Democrats vote against him? Now it's 95-0. See what I mean? Federal Society likes him.
This is
my pick. I got to go against you. If I were Trump, I'm going with Hardiman.
And you may well be right, but politics is very situational, and what someone is in favor of when they're in the majority can be very different when they're in the minority.
Okay, so you're saying Trump's got the majority. He should be if they.
I'm saying that a Senate that confirmed Thomas Hardiman unanimously to the Court of Appeals is not necessarily going to confirm him unanimously.
Oh, I see. Yes, it's
Supreme
quite
Court.
different. Now we're talking Supreme Court. So we only have a minute or two left. Let's just go through quickly. The last three, you put it like 1% each, right? Just give us their names and their background, but they're not too likely to, Trump's not too likely to go with them.
In my view, not too likely.
Who are they?
They're
Who's number
all
6?
extremely well qualified, no particular order.
Okay,
Except
tied for 6.
alphabetically, tied for 6 would be Steve Culleton, 54-year-old out of the 8th Circuit, which sits in St. Louis, who's from Iowa.
Princeton and Yale, we like that. Or, maybe we don't like that, yeah.
Some people like that.
Okay.
Justice Scalia suggested in his Obergefell dissent maybe that wasn't
Significant
such a good
experience
idea.
at the 8th Circuit Court of Appeals, so they know his record.
Been around for a long time.
And also tied for that last place, so to speak.
Is Neil Gorsuch out of the 10th Circuit in Denver, 49-year-old who went to Columbia, Harvard, and Oxford, clerk for David Sentell, very colorful judge on the D.C. Circuit, and then 2 Supreme Court justices, the late Byron Whizzer White and Anthony Kennedy. He's a niece of Ann Gorsuch, the first female EPA administrator. And then finally, Raymond Grunder, also out of the 8th Circuit, who is a 54-year-old blue-collar guy, comes from a broken home, worked his way through Wash U, got his bachelor's, master's, and JD, and as far as I know, is the only one in the mix who has actually been shot by his own father.
Okay, but so to go back, and briefly in 1 minute, you have 8 of these people, but 2 of them, Diane Sykes and Bill Pryor, you put at 90% likely it's going to be one of those 2, and you say it's Diane Sykes.
I think it's going to be Diane Sykes.
And tell us why it's political as well as, well, one, Trump is comfortable that he meets the demands of conservatives to have a true conservative that won't change, right?
But that is correct, but it's political because the process is political, and you have to win votes.
What will Democrats do if it's one of those two? If it's Sipes or it's Pryor, what will the Democrats do?
If it's Pryor, they may even filibuster.
Which means the Republicans would have to come up with, if they kept all 52 Republicans, they would need 8 Democrats.
They would need at least 8 Democrats.
Can they get them for one of those 2? For Pryor or Sykes?
That's why he's only my second choice.
Okay.
Sykes, yes.
Sykes, they can surely get it because she's a woman.
Sykes, she's female. I think it's going to be a lot harder to filibuster. Pryor was actually filibustered for his current position when he was first nominated, then got a recess appointment and was confirmed relatively narrowly.
Right. So you, understanding politics, say you're going with Sykes. You know Bill Pryor. You've met him. You've dined with him. You like this guy, but he may not get through. But Sykes, you're sure she should. Why get
Sykes,
involved in a nasty filibuster and then have to make Sykes your second choice? Is that your point?
That's my point, especially for an administration that is going to be fought tooth and nail on every single appointment and almost every single cabinet position.
Thank you so much, David Applegate. David Applegate is one of those masters of the universe. As he looks out from this beautiful office, seriously, you see at the expanse of the loop, you see all of those fantastic buildings in Lake Michigan. You try cases, people come down that long hall we may have shown, they come to you and they say, I have something that may actually end up in the Supreme Court. You've been there. It's not like some of these guys who get into the end zone, and they dance and get penalized because act like you've been in that end zone before. You don't have to act. You've been to the Supreme Court before. Your firm has been there before. Williams, Montgomery, and John, great trial lawyers. Barry Montgomery, Peter John, David Applegate, Chris Barber. They're all good, but those are 4 I know well. All right? No dispute there?
I'm not going to dispute that.
And you now know who the next nominee will be. It will be Diane Sykes. There's just not much excitement. I hate to take it away from you folks. We may come back and talk about it some more. But on January 9th, if you wanted to know who the next nominee of the Supreme Court was going to be, as you'll find out on January 20th or thereabouts, where did you go? You went to Public Affairs. And you come back next week and every week to Public Affairs.